Welcome to day 3 of your ClickUp mini course. Today we'll talk about how to tailor ClickUp to your workflow and make sure it's fitted to your company or organization requirements. We'll talk about the importance of customization in ClickUp. Then we'll talk about everything you can customize. So statuses, tags, custom fields, and views. And we'll see how all of these work together. Back to our little diagram. There are 4 things you can customize in ClickUp. It's statuses, tags, custom fields, and views. And we've talked about this already, but everything in ClickUp works in inheritance, which means that if you apply a customization to a space, it will apply to all the folders and lists of that space. The same way, if you apply something to a list, it will only apply to that list. If I create a custom field in list 4, I will not see it in list 5 or in ads or in list 6 or in content, etc. A custom field or tag or anything in marketing, I will see it in content, ads, list 6, list 5, list 4, blog, socials, etc. You will see it everywhere in that space called marketing. One huge piece of advice, again, make sure that you customize things in the smallest level possible. If you create a custom field, make sure it's at the smallest level possible. And it works the same way with statuses. However, there's a bit of a difference with tags, where tags apply to all the space. If you use a tag in your newsletter list, you will see it in all of the other lists of that space, which means that if you have custom information to use on your newsletter list, use a custom field instead of a tag. Tags have to stay very general and applied to a whole team. For the marketing team, it could be a tag like review if the marketing manager has to review some information. Let's start with statuses. Statuses in ClickUp are what defines your workflow. And the best way to have a look at statuses is to go to a Kanban view. In this view, as you can see, all the tasks are going through different statuses applied to social media. Open task, ready, writing, approval, rejected, and published. This is a very basic marketing workflow or set of statuses. Now to change these statuses, we have to right click on the level where we want to change them. Here I want to change them in the social media list. I'll just right click and go to list settings and list statuses. From here, what I can do is add or remove steps. For example, if there is a step called shooting where I will record a video, I can add a status, call it shooting, and save my content template. And then I'll move that right after writing, for example. All right, save template. And here we go. We have a whole new status. If I decided to use this workflow at the whole content level, so this would apply to newsletter, blog, social media, what I could do is go to folder settings and then statuses the same way and use that status workflow that I've defined before called content. What happens is that if you go to newsletter, all of the tasks will follow that new workflow. But you might ask yourself, this doesn't work for newsletter. You could have a set of statuses for everything that's below content and have custom statuses for a certain list. It doesn't have to inherit the statuses that come from content. If you want to change that, you just right click on the list, go to list settings again, and change your statuses. And we can revert back to do in progress, complete, for example. You have to keep in mind that when you change statuses, you have to do it at the right level. If you have a workflow for your ads folder, make sure you set your statuses at ads folder level. But you have very specific statuses for Facebook ads or Google ads, you have to set the statuses at list levels. Again, use a diagramming tool, list your workflows for each of your company's processes and apply these workflows to the right levels, whether it's spaces, folders, or lists. Moving on to tags. What I'll do is that I'll create a tag. And again, getting back to the concept of tags, they apply to all the space. Think of what is common to everything in your space, what the whole marketing team has in common that has to be labeled. It could be something like having a review tag that whenever you need help from the marketing manager, you input the review tag. Say on this email campaign, I need actually to get some feedback about when to schedule the article. I'll just add the review tag. And we could imagine creating a view, and we'll talk about that later, where the marketing manager could see everything that has to be reviewed. Custom fields is the third way to customize your information in ClickUp. If you wanted to track custom information, like which social media platform this has to be published on, I could create a custom field called platform. And here I've prepared this. This field contains the social media platform where this has to be pushed, like LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and this is a label field. That means I could add as many platforms as I wanted to. Now, what if I wanted to distinguish what is tutorial content from what is tips? Because I have two different people working on these topics, and I want to make sure as a manager that they have a clear view on what topics they're working on and what they have to do. I'll create a custom field that is called content type, and I will put either tutorials or tips and tricks, and I will label all my tasks. Let's do that together. I'll click add a column, and the list view is the best to add a custom field. And if I click there, as you can see, there are so many custom information you can add. You could add dates, emails, checkboxes, files. Make sure you use the relevant custom field. We will use the drop-down custom field, and we will call this content type. And we will have two options. One is tutorials, and the other is tips and tricks. I'll add my column, and then I will be able to label my tasks. Here we have a tutorial on basic design tools, so I'll label it as tutorial. How to plan when design, it's tutorial. How to create a website yourself is tutorial. 5 things to do when updating a website is actually tips and tricks. And post tips on good web design is tips and tricks. I've labeled all my content here, and that allows us to move on to customizing views. Let's start to talk about the different views you have. There are 3 types of views in ClickUp. The first one, that I call the planning view, is more used to plan your tasks in time and schedule them. There are 3 types of views for this. Gantt, which is very appropriate to project management when you need to plan tasks in time but also define dependencies. Timeline view, that is appropriate when you need to define a lot of start and end dates for your tasks. And calendar view, which is a way to view and plan your tasks by month or week or day. Moving on to the execution views, there's the list view, which we've seen and is actually the main view of ClickUp. It's the default view, you can remove it from anywhere, and it's, to me, the most useful view, and you'll find yourself using that 95% of the time. Then we have the board view, which is more tailored to teams working through a very specific workflow, like the social media workflow we've seen, or an HR workflow, or CRM, or an IT team. So a team that needs this kind of pipeline. There are 2 monitoring views that come with a business plan, and that's the box view and the workload view. These views allow you to see your team's workload, but also know who has to do what and how time is allocated. There's a few views I haven't talked about, like the table view or the mind map, the activity views, but these are less relevant and you'll use them less frequently. Starting off with the timeline view. The timeline view is the best one if you want to plan your start and end dates of each task. The first thing I recommend you to do when using the timeline view is to go to customization and remove weekends. This will allow you to have more days in your view, and most teams don't work on weekends. The timeline view will allow you to start and end dates pretty seamlessly from there. This task starts on the 17th, but it actually has a deadline on the 28th. What I can do is just slide it to the 28th. Same for this one. For example, it ends up on the 29th, and say this one on the 5th or 6th. And then this one, let's put it till the 7th. Moving on to the Gantt view. Now that our tasks are scheduled, the Gantt view allows you to create dependencies between tasks and subtasks. What we can do here is schedule the subtasks for this task, Acme Core Design Showcase. And I'll just schedule a few of them, start and end dates. Then I'll actually create a dependency. I'll say, collect the before design has to happen before posting the project screenshots. There's a little dot appearing, and I'll just drag it to the left of that one. And what happens is that I will create a task dependency between both. If I haven't finished this task before I've finished this one, ClickUp will show me a warning that there is a task dependency. If you have a large project with a lot of dependencies and you're having a very strict PM workflow, the Gantt view is best. Moving on to the calendar view. Here we have all our tasks, like the newsletter, the blog, the social media, and they are using a custom field that we've created, and it's called launch date. Through this custom field, we can know when the launch dates are scheduled and drag and drop each task to reschedule launch dates if we wanted to. If I wanted to reschedule this post publication, I will just drag and drop it to whatever date I want to, and this will just affect the launch date custom field and not the deadline of the whole project. This is a very useful use case for event planning, content creation, planning launches, etc., etc. Moving on to our execution views. These views are where things get done. That's where your operational team will move tasks from one status to another. And the main view for this is the list view. The list view is best when you need to have all of the information on a task and group and filter information as well. You can group and filter information everywhere, but the list view is a really good way to actually see a lot of information and also refine it the best way possible. An example, now that we have defined a content type for each task, we can group tasks not by status, but by content type. As you can see now, our tasks are not grouped by status, and each of my team members can focus on working on tutorials, tips and tricks, client showcase, Q&A separately. They all have their own little groupings that allow them to see tasks more seamlessly. The same way you can group tasks, you can also filter them. Instead of seeing all my tasks, I want to see content that will be published on Instagram only. What I will do is use a filter and use the platform custom field and say is Instagram. And there we go. We will have only Instagram tasks appearing. You can imagine so many use cases by combining these custom fields, groupings, and filters. I hope this opens your mind to realizing that you don't actually have to create 1,000 lists here on the left. You could have a single list containing all of your content, use a custom field, and then you create views for each content type. This will totally unclutter your workspace because instead of ending with tens and tens of lists, you will segment your information through the different views on top. Moving on to the board view. The board view is great if you want your tasks to appear in a Kanban-like way. So you can just drag and drop your tasks this way, and you could actually decide to group your tasks through different ways, not only by status. Instead of grouping by status, I could decide to group by content type. And what happens is that I will see these different segments. Another thing you could do with a board view is that you could go back by status, but create what is called swim lanes. I'll go to my groupings and then I'll turn on the swim lane for this view and group things by content type. There we go. We'll have all the tasks grouped by statuses, but also subgrouped by content type. Moving on to the workload view. I have two people that work on this marketing team, and basically I've scheduled all the start and end dates of each task, assigned them, and estimated them. Remember, scheduling, assigning, estimating. You need these three to make sure the workload view works. Once you've set all that up, you can actually plan your team's capacity, which means if I decide to schedule and it actually has a pretty big estimate and it's assigned to these people, it will impact their capacity. Whereas if I decided to move the task to a longer timeline, it will even out people's capacity through the available hours they have. What you have to make sure for this to work is to also refine your people's capacity, because everyone has some slack time, some meeting time, some days off. So you can control this here by adjusting these default 80 hours per 2 weeks to 70 hours. Just click here and adjust your capacity from 40 hours a week to 35 hours a week, for example, and apply to everyone. And as you can see, this will adjust team's capacity, and obviously some tasks will make some people go over capacity. You have two options, either to reassign the task to someone else or to even out the task's time. You could decide the task has to be done a little bit earlier so that the person's capacity is okay. As you can see now, it's just right at the limit, but that person in theory still has the capacity to work on these projects and still be on time. And if I had to give one last piece of advice to customization, is to keep it simple, but still keep it consistent and spend as much time as needed in setting things up properly in ClickUp in the beginning. Because the more time you spend in making sure that your setup is customized to your team, the less time they'll spend adjusting everything in their day-to-day. That was it for day 3 of your mini course. I hope it helps you understand how you can tailor ClickUp to your own workflow and requirements. And if you have any questions about this course or how to optimize ClickUp, feel free to reach out to me on my website. See you.